call the Climate Action Baseline Assessment that tried to summarize everything that we learned in just a few pages and also provided some preliminary potential goals. And the intent of all of this, and especially the preliminary potential goals, was to give our collaborative planning team a place to start the dialogue. We found people respond and can dig into a process very quickly if you give them something to say that they like or don't like. And so that's really what that process is about. Some of the things that we see through the climate vulnerability assessment, we have climate change projections. And in this chart that you see here, we've got our baseline numbers, which are tend to be within the last, the average for the last 30 years. We have projections through 2050, so the middle of this century, and we have projections all the way through the end of the century, 2100. What I will say is that these projections for the middle of the century are relatively baked in based on emissions that have occurred to date globally. However, the projections, as we move beyond that, especially through the end of the century, we have an awful lot of opportunity collectively to bend those projections downward through reduction of our emissions. By the way, there was a question at a previous meeting. This data you can find through the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit, their Climate Explorer. And then you look at the RCP 8.5, which is what is known as the business as usual climate model. Through our engagements on a survey, we discovered that within the survey respondents within the county, about 85% have reported noticing some signs of climate change, while about 74% had reported being impacted by one or more of the impacts of climate change already. So although climate change is definitely something we want to be thinking about for the future, we are already experiencing some impacts. When we asked folks how much they agreed with the King County or their community taking action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, or whether they felt it was important for the county or their community to take action to prepare for projected impacts, both of those questions had roughly 75% indicating completely agreeing or agreeing with those statements. Looking at our GHG emissions inventory for the year 2019, county-wide, so this is everything within the boundary of the county, residents and businesses and government, etc. Total emissions were a little over 7 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions. That little volume, I like to visualize the volume of atmospheric greenhouse gas emissions that we're emitting. And that little volume just gives us a sense as to what that is volumetrically speaking every year. The goal within the CAP, we have a two-stage goal. Stage one is through 2030, achieving a 25% reduction of countywide GHG emissions by 2030. And then a longer term goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. The reason for the sidestep is the long-term vision goal is a great long-term goal. It's really difficult to steer against a 25-year goal. So having something a little bit closer is a little bit easier to track progress against. And just to sort of review that against other regional communities that do have climate action plans, you'll see, from Chicago all around the region, Evanston, La Crosse, Wisconsin, Madison, Milwaukee, etc. Communities that do have climate action plans have similar goals, if not slightly more aggressive in the front end, and some of them slightly less aggressive in the long term, where they may say 80% instead of 100% reduction. But by and large, communities that do climate action planning are aiming in the same general direction, because we're all looking at science-based recommendations for what we collectively need to do with our emissions to reduce those long-term impacts. So the plan itself is comprised of 9 sectors, so broad sort of areas of consideration. They're listed here. Those sectors collectively then have 44 strategies or strategic goals that give us areas that we want to sort of shoot at for each one of those sectors. And those strategies then are supported by a menu of 255 actions that detail steps that can be taken. And related to those actions, for the community-wide scope, the focus is on encouraging and supporting action. So how might we help support folks that want to take action? What can we do to help encourage that? The menu of options also include guidance on Kane County operations for both operations and community leadership. How can Kane County help play a role in supporting and encouraging? And also, as was noted earlier, the actions include sort of menu of actions that municipalities or other public entities in Kane County could take inspiration from or select to explore in their own municipality. And as noted earlier, any action that suggests exploring a policy or an ordinance change or anything like that should be expected to go through an appropriate process as a part of that action's implementations. Whether it's an action that the county is taking or that a municipality is taking, we would anticipate that it would go through the appropriate policy or ordinance review and conversation process. So just to give you kind of a high-level overview of the goals in each of the sectors, for transportation and land use, there are 7 strategic goals. The first 5 are both community-wide and operations. The last 2 are government operations focused that really just sort of emulate the community-wide. So the overarching goals here, we're looking for about a 28% reduction in total greenhouse gas emissions associated with transportation. Looking for a reduction in total vehicle miles traveled, also known as VMT, looking at a 5% reduction there. Looking at an increase in public transit use and an increase in electric vehicle or other zero or very low emission vehicle use. The next sector is the buildings and energy. Very similar to transportation. The first 5 are focused for community-wide, that also include things that can support government operations. But the last 3 goals are specific towards government operations that sort of echo the strategic goals that are focused community-wide. The primary goals that we're looking at here are reduction in greenhouse gas emissions of 26%, an increase in renewable energy utilization of 25%, which can include both on-site as well as customer purchased, and a reduction in our electric use and a reduction in our on-site fossil fuel combustion. Both of those looking at a 12% reduction. In our waste management sector, we've got 4 overarching goals looking for a reduction in GHG, or greenhouse gas emissions, of about 7%, a reduction in our total solid waste that's generated of about 2.5%, and an increase in our organics collection. So that is, rather than sending organics to landfills where it creates greenhouse gas emissions, instead collecting those organics and diverting them for composting and other strategies that can help, rather than create GHG emissions, create soil, for instance. And lastly, looking to increase our diversion for recycling by 11%. So capturing more of that paper, glass, aluminum, metal recycling opportunities. In the water and wastewater sector, our overarching goals are to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 5%, and that relates directly to a reduction of our wastewater generation of 5%. We're also looking to help increase overall water conservation, so let's use less water where we can, updating standards relative to planning to become more resilient to stormwater and flood mitigation concerns, increasing our water protection and restoration, our groundwater and our surface water, and encouraging and engaging the public, giving more information on water quality and conservation opportunities. In our local food and agriculture area, we're looking to increase the share of farms that use low emission practices. We're looking to reduce GHG emissions related to manure management. And we're looking to increase production of and access to local food, particularly food that could support and serve our low-income community members or food insecure individuals. Looking to reduce food waste and hunger, and looking to protect and preserve agricultural land, and also helping to increase its resilience to climate shocks. In our green space and ecosystems sector, we're looking to increase tree canopy cover. And I will say that those goals there are not assuming that we take over agricultural land to create tree cover, but instead placing trees where placing trees are appropriate. We're looking to increase pollinator supportiveness of lawns and grasslands by replacing turf that might be manicured using pesticides, et cetera, and replace it with native grasses and prairie restoration opportunities. We're looking to reduce heat island or micro heat island effect through the reduction of impervious surfaces. And we're looking to reduce invasive species and increase the climate resilience and biodiversity of our green spaces. In our health and safety sector, we're looking to help assist vulnerable populations, preparing for and mitigating climate change impacts, looking to educate, engage, and empower the public health and safety risks throughout the community. We're looking to ensure mission critical emergency services and healthcare facilities within the community are prepared for climate change impacts. And last, we're looking to help strengthen community response capacity. So what can we do to help create stronger social support networks, just supporting neighbors, helping neighbors kinds of considerations. And then lastly, in the climate economy sector, we're looking to try to capture the economic value of some of these changes. For instance, if we're going to increase renewable energy installations, somebody's going to install that. Let's have that be a Kane County employee. Let's have that be a Kane County business doing that. So where can we capture new economic development to further advance Kane County? We're looking to support equitable workforce development. How can we help those efforts turn into jobs to support local community members? We're looking to provide support to local businesses to build resilience. How can we help them be aware of potential climate impacts on their supply chains or their operations, or help them think about those things and build a little bit more resilience? Help them establish, help the county establish suitable and sustainable financing for the implementation of the plan. We're looking to communicate climate action economic development opportunities to stakeholder groups. There's an awful lot of opportunities out there relative to grants and so forth. How can we help make sure that those are communicated, as well as the other economic opportunities that we see? And then finally, preparing for climate change migration. That has already begun. We know that folks are moving out of places like California or Florida to other parts of the country because they're tired of storms or wildfires. Some communities, for instance, Duluth, Minnesota is a great example of it. They have literally started a campaign where they're trying to let folks know Duluth is a great place to move to in terms of climate impacts. They're turning what could be otherwise be a negative into a positive. How do we create opportunities for the community, or how do we help make sure that any migration in that's climate caused doesn't create challenges, but instead creates opportunities for the community? In terms of the impacts of implementing the plan, successful implementation of the strategies would achieve overall about a 26.5% reduction in GHG emissions through 2030. And we projected impacts relative to community-wide cost savings and costs. So for instance, in transportation, if someone buys an EV, we know that right now there is currently an average cost difference to buy an EV. There's also some averages relative to cost savings on a per mile maintenance, so annual maintenance costs and fuel cost savings. Same thing with building energy efficiency. If someone invests in making their home more energy efficient, there are some good return on investment calculations that we can use to anticipate how much money might go into community-wide investments in energy efficiency. And we know how much we're spending on electricity and natural gas now. How much will we save if we hit those targets? So we can project some of those community-wide costs and benefits. We've also included the avoidance of social cost of carbon, which is understanding that into the future, we could see very significant impacts. There is a value for that to avoid those. So adding those up, the plan overall has about $6.7 billion worth of cumulative savings potential. Lastly, I just want to touch on implementation actions. We've got a couple strategies that we offer up to help support implementing this plan. The first strategy is focusing on organizing for implementation. So it's got a few actions in there. The first is we recommend establishing clear guidance and direction that county departments are expected to participate in the implementation of the plan. Many hands make light work. Secondly, establish an internal climate action implementation team, which can be comprised of representatives from each of those departments. That internal team then can focus on developing an annual implementation plan for each year that identifies specific actions that they want to implement. That way they can make sure it relates with other work that they're doing. They can anticipate whether there is an impact to fiscal or staff needs, and that can be done through the typical budgeting process. So implementation can be related to understanding impacts if there are any. And then lastly, suggesting that you review the implementation progress on a regular basis, either once a year or once every 2 years. And with that, we recommend looking at your GHG inventory emissions. And as you look at implementation, you can decide if some actions you want to tweak, add, or delete if you just discover certain actions are not doing what you want them to do. And then lastly, the last strategy is focusing on facilitating collaborative efforts with the community. So for that, we suggest establishing a Kane County Climate Action Collaboration Team, or maybe you can come up with a better word, better name for it. But that would be comprised of representatives from local governments, public entities, could be volunteers, nonprofit associations, community groups, folks that are interested in helping support action. They can get together to collaborate with each other. We also suggest exploring creating a roster of climate action speakers bureau or volunteers. So folks that are excited and motivated, have some experience or knowledge to help support actions. You know, you can just see volunteer tree planters or folks that would love to share their knowledge about EVs with people that are interested, those kinds of things. And then thirdly, establishing a coordinated communication and education campaign. Each of the sectors have opportunities for us to share information to the public. So just simply organizing that so that the county can do that in an orderly fashion. You can look for opportunities to maximize those communication pieces. And then lastly, establishing and regularly maintaining a database of funding. There are an awful lot of incentives and grants available that we anticipate to continue for some time. Those grants evolve very rapidly, we have discovered. So just being cognizant of that and finding a way to proactively sort of scan the horizon for grants can be very beneficial. One of the greatest opportunities of having a plan like this is that it supports very rapid grant application. So you might find great funding to help support lots of efforts that you want to do. So with that, I'll just pause and answer any questions I can or support the conversation.
Oh, yes, thank you, Ted, very much. That was very informative, Ms. Strathman.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. That was a lot of really great information. I do have just a couple of quick questions. This is Cheryl Strathman. When you mentioned the cities of Madison and Eau Claire and Northbrook working on a climate action implementation plan, are they working with their counties as well? Or are they just doing it on their city municipality just by themselves?
I can't say for certain for everybody on that list, but my recollection is that everybody that happens to be on that list, I believe that is a municipal level plan. I could be wrong though.
Okay, well, I think it's impressive that we're doing a countywide approach. My second question is when you talked about migration, there's another migration that I hear about from time to time, and that's the migration of plants and trees, both moving north because we're too warm here, or coming north because we're warmer than we had been. Will that be covered at all in this?
Yes, absolutely. That's an excellent point. In the green space and trees sector, ecosystem sector, does have a number of strategies around both. That's part of the reason why we're suggesting native grass replacement of turf. Doing that, we can help preserve some of those native ecosystems. The tree sector also has actions relative to natives, climate adaptive species, and there's a number of actions relative to reducing impacts of invasives.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate those answers.
Any other questions? Mr. Roth?
Roth here. Have you looked at the low-hanging fruit improvements? Because the plan, I know, gives everything, and there's some low-hanging fruit I think, us as a county can address. There was an article that came out 2 years ago, August, about just planting more trees is one of the least expensive improvement to helping climate. And I don't think we as a county are currently doing anything proactively to plant more trees. And to work with transportation where we have property, we don't have to worry about a safety issue or forest reserves. There's a lot of land here. I mean, from the tree resolution presentation, where the number of trees we used to have 100 years ago, we'll never maybe get back to that in our lifetime, but we're not doing anything currently to do it. That's one. And then the other was, there was actually just an article last week in the Tribune about the methane gas leaking on our landfills. And I don't have the exact percentage, but I think the leakage is, and I'm not sure if it's one landfill, but is equal to building one coal plant a year or something like that. So that's a huge, because methane gas causes, I think they said 4 times as much as an issue as burning coal because of the effect it has on the atmosphere. And I'm not saying I have an answer, but that seems, since we have 2 landfills in Kane County, that we should at least take a look at that so we're not in react mode.
There's actually a plant out there. We're collecting the gas from both landfills, and it's actually generating electricity for a number of homes in the city of Geneva. So that's already
No.
been.
But the article said we're leaking more than they're reporting, like 50% more methane is leaking out of those landfills.
With the gas collection system, it actually creates
Even
a
with
vacuum.
they said even with the gas fill. And so they gave some examples of a couple of the landfills.
I believe, Jody, we are monitoring that because perhaps in response to this question, we can, at the next meeting.
And that's, I'm just saying we need to look at it because the state's captured it and the waste company are saying, oh, no, that's wrong. So they're arguing, they're fighting over the numbers.
Let's take a look at our
And we can give some
landfills.
additional information.
And that's why I'm just saying we should be proactive because that could be a huge opportunity. Maybe not an easy answer, but if we don't look at it, we don't know.
We're already capturing it. So I
Right,
think we
right.
just provide the background information from waste management to the committee.
Okay. And that's what the article said is the waste companies are underreporting the actual.
Well, I read that article as well, and I appreciate your concerns, and we will be on it because
Right.
we've got too many people in that area where that landfill is. It's a highly populated area.
Right.
And if I could make one bold suggestion, I had mentioned, I'd make one bold suggestion regarding trees. And just for consideration, we're celebrating the anniversary of the United States in a few more years. Why don't we plant that many trees? And how about if we do, I guess, native oaks or whatever would be appropriate tree planting to have an array of trees around some of our streets, certainly around our county properties. as appropriate. So that may be a nice tribute to United States.
And the Forest Preserve is actually planning to do that, but I challenged them. They're celebrating their 100th anniversary. And I recommended they plant 1,000 trees instead of just 100, but.
I'll stand with my suggestion. Achievable goals.
It's not an either or, right?
Mr. Young, I hear you. You've got your hand up, please.
Thank you. Are we going to, since you changed the, David Young speaking, since you changed up the agenda, what are we doing here? Are we going to have public speaking and then we're going to have a discussion with the board members? What are we doing here now? Just curious.
I was asked to have public presentation after this presentation. So the public will be allowed to speak. I have their names. I'm ready to go. But there have been questions from the board, Mr. Young, and we're just allowing those questions to be asked. That's all.
Okay, because should I go ahead and voice my concerns now, or should we just go ahead and wait until after public comment? I just want to know what the order is.
I think we would all welcome to hear what you have to say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I will go ahead. First of all, when Ted talked about people leaving Kane County or leaving Illinois or California, I mean, that's not due to climate change. That's due to poor economic conditions. So I don't know where he's linking that, but I want to go through several things here. Page 5, where well, first of all, going back to his presentation is much shorter than the presentation we got in environmental and energy. It was that presentation is about 140 pages long, and this presentation is only 26 pages long. So I've got several things on page 5 in his existing presentation. You know, he says that the trend is over 30 years, and I don't think there's enough data where you can actually predict the future over 30 years. He says in 2100, we're going to be at a certain level. I don't know how you could, over 30 years, predict and make such a statement. On page 7 and 8, he mentions that we have 1,100 respondents to a survey, and 75%, roughly 75% of those respondents agree that action should be taken. So I'm going to say that's roughly about 825 respondents think that we should do something in Kane County. And that's less than 0.2% of the population of Kane County. So we're implementing this in a plan based upon a very small population. Page 9, he talks about the greenhouse gas emissions, over 7 million metric tons. So what? Is that bad? I don't think it is. They want to reduce greenhouse gases by 25% by 2030 and reach 100% carbon neutrality by 2050. I mean, why 25%? Why not go bigger than that? And how are you measuring this, by the way? When you measure greenhouse gases, I actually or looked into how you measure carbon dioxide, because carbon dioxide is the #1 component of greenhouse gases. And you're talking about how do you measure CO2 outdoors? I actually contacted a company that sells CO2 sensors for indoor, and they said that you really can't measure outdoors. So I have no idea how you're going to measure CO2, how you're going to do the data collection. What's the CO2 level today? How are you going to, what do you want to change it from, and where you want to go? I know worldwide we talk about 421 parts per million, but no one can tell me what the level here is in Kane County. Page 11, you mentioned different cities that are participating in greenhouse gas reductions. So what? Who cares? We're Kane County. The taxpayers really don't really want to hear about other cities and other counties. And then when you look at page 42 in the packet from the Environmental and Energy Committee, which is not in this packet, it's a much larger information, but in that one, it appears that this climate action plan is not geared specifically towards Kane County. It really appears to be like a generic blueprint for any community in the United States. It references the United Nations. It references the Conference of Mayors. Why are we in Kane County so concerned about United Nations and U.S. Conference of Mayors? We're just concerned about Kane County. So we shouldn't have our discussions based upon what's happening in Shanghai, China, or Boston, Massachusetts. Page 43 of that packet, he references only a few years, a snapshot in time. I think that's the same site he had on before, but why don't we look at a bigger specter or a bigger section of time, 1500, 1700, 1800, 1900, what were the greenhouse gas emissions then? We don't know that. Page 44, he mentions power outages, road damage, bridge collapse, and water infrastructure failure. When did we experience that over the last few years? There's no examples. In my mind, these are simply scare tactics. Page 46, it shows a 9-year trend of Kane County actually reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So we're doing good. Why do we need to implement a more stringent plan? And then you start talking about the implementation plan on page 112. And it says, for example, encouraging engineering staff to earn continuing education credits related to bicycle infrastructure, where they just want you to ride bikes, use mass transit, walk and bike to school, parks, and grocery stores. And then they want you to increase the population per developed acre. So you want to have more people per acre. And that's what they do in China. That's why you have these high rises, 30 stories, 50 stories, and you have all these people in one place, and they do that because it's a lot easier to control people. Page 119, TL4-6, develop an incentive program to convert fuel-burning lawn equipment, such as gas-powered lawnmowers and blowers, to electric. How? Some people can't do that. BE3-7, page 124, create a volunteer think tank to identify facilities in the community with excessive waste heat. Consider creating a database to contain data from all studies from this plan. Just data collection to make sure you don't use enough energy. Page 125. You're focusing on low-income citizens to change their houses over to heat pumps and that sort of thing. How are you going to fund that? BE4-3, page 125. Establish a solar-ready ordinance to require all new residential, multifamily residential, and commercial buildings to be solar ready. That's an ordinance to be solar ready. It sounds like it's going to be mandatory. Waste management, WM1-5, page 128. Establish a universal zero waste ordinance requiring all property owners to provide recycling and compost collection services and requiring businesses to use these services. That's going to be mandatory. It's going to drive out businesses. WM3-2, page 131. Develop and enforce ordinances requiring commercial customers to recycle material streams like cardboard, paper, beverage containers, etc. Collaborate with other local governments for joint enforcement of county and municipal ordinances. Enforcement of ordinances. This will surely drive business out of Kane County, for sure. Health and safety, HS2-3, page 143. Develop and implement a plan to monitor climate change-related illnesses. Like what? This plan to me is just it's a huge burden, and you are just looking at passing this kind of climate action plan that is just it's going to end up making people do things that they don't want to do based upon ordinances. And it's also going to push businesses to do the same thing. And so when we go to vote for this thing, I am encouraging everyone to take a look at the environmental and energy packet that has 140 pages on it roughly, and just, you got to vote against this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, are there any other board members who'd like to make a comment on this? Yes, Ms. Chuby?
Thank you. So one of my problems with this, as I've spoken with Ms. Bates, is that I think it should be more aspirational than enforceable. I'm concerned about ordinances that are going to be passed in the future that will become become a burden through unfunded mandates. I like the carrot approach where we do incentives. I don't like the stick approach. And one of the things that Ms. Walnick said in the very beginning was it doesn't mandate changes that would impact the residents or the businesses. And yet Mr. Young is not incorrect when it's asking, there's multiple references for require, which I spoke to as that's a non-starter for me. And enforcement is very hard for me when we're talking about suggestions and those who want to do this can do it. And here's a blueprint for them. So I'm hearing one thing and I'm reading something else in the actual plan. So I'm having a disconnect with that. I would love to support this as an inspirational thing for people that want to spend the extra money or that want to change lifestyles. I'm having a really hard time with the unfunded mandates, transportation, especially when you look at just say you look at school buses, if you're going to be asking those to be all electric, that's a huge unfunded mandate on the school districts. And the bulk of their money comes from taxpayers, which means they're going to have to increase their levies again. So I just want to caution, this should be worded in a way that makes it a blueprint that people want to follow and not something that they are going to be forced to follow. I think we'll be more successful.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? It's
Yes, please. Ms. Hinshaw, I believe you and Mr. Redmond have gone through this paper with a fine tooth comb to look for places that said required.
Yes, we have, okay. Yes, we've definitely gone through that. We've gone through it again a second time, and we have removed one thing that is just one spot that is different than here. One thing to note is that any of these, this is again, this is a living plan that will be changing over time, again, with technologies. But nothing in here as of today is being mandated or enforced. When the time comes and we are seeing something that does say words like require, we're going to put a lot of research into that and to see if that's truly the best action at that time. And of course, if you replay, look a little bit deeper.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I have a question for both is there we have to achieve or
that I will ask Ms. Walnick.
No, there's no state mandates. Opportunities using that plan to, there's a letter Roth pointed out. There's opportunities that came up through that 2012 that enabled us to utilize that plan. We have so many energy efficiency projects that can be done that save for many, many years. And the intent as well is to look for these opportunities when we would have this plan in place to us to put money for energy efficiency in some in our lower income area, those increasing insulation that they are then through the last 12 years with their sustainability on the county, that's cost the county money. There's nothing been mandated on the community that's cost the community a large track record of obtaining global money. And that's the intent with this plan as well, to save a lot of money and that are going to give us
Quiet.
be carbon neutral, to be 100% down, as I understand at that point.
With the action items included some sort of goal out there. And then as science changes and as they best to obtain those grants and initiatives for our, that we can work together as a team and to implement the initiatives.
It was quite open and I could not understand. Do you think there would be a point we have to put a freeze on new construction?
That again, mandates for buses and stuff, we just be electric. So the same would go for property rights. You have everyone has property rights as a property owner in Kane County. And under our zoning requirements, they're allowed to process and change the, to my knowledge, I'm not an attorney and attorneys enough, that wouldn't be something we would have to pursue it.
Great.
Ms. Bates, hold on a second. We've got Mr.
Of what the cost impact would be.
It is that the intent of this plan, and as I mentioned, from the 20 for all and our solar programs, them cost-effective solar options to put on their 3 to 5 year payback, those residents' money. And that's always first and foremost, we save the residents money in addition to gases. And the same thing with the county side, there's so many low-hanging fruit that we have in gases. And we're always looking to do that and running the numbers and invest in a greenhouse technology. The technology is only going to be 15 years. That just doesn't make any sense. We want to have with reasonable options that they can be green, but at the same time save their household money.
Question is, I guess I have some concern items in which we don't have authority, or what we need a plan where we don't have authority to implement.
Ms. Hinshaw's comment is that to make sure the language matches what we're able to pursue. And in most cases, these are going to be voluntary actions. There's very little that we can enforce in regards to any of the initiatives. Like I mentioned, we can't force all the buses in Kane County to become electric. We just don't have that authority. But we can find grants for those school districts if they are willing and wanting to convert over to electric or hydrogen or whatever it might be, working collaboratively and working with our municipalities and our school districts, we have a greater power in numbers to get funding for stuff like that. But that's going to be something that comes to us as, hey, a bunch of school districts are interested in converting their buses. What can you guys do as Kane County to help support us in getting some grant money to do that? And that's how the 2012 plan worked. And that's how we will continue to implement the climate action plan.
All right, hold on, Mr. Roth, you've already spoken once. Is there anybody else who would like to speak who's not yet spoken?
Madam Chairman, this is Alan.
Yes, Miss Allen.
Part of this is we seem to be focusing on thou must. And what the county's always done is here are opportunities. We could. Think about this. If the plumbing rules were changed, then somebody who wanted to build a building right now could use the water on their roof or the water that's collected in their gutters and use that for flushing toilets as opposed to having to use potable water. So if we as government can just set up ways that will help people save money, live a little better, what we're doing is creating opportunities. And it's glass half full versus glass half empty. And what we want to do is set up opportunities as, fortunately, we have experts, Ms. Womack with an engineering degree on the wall, Mr. Redmond with his credentials, backing up these things to say, yes, these are things that we can do. We just need to put them in place so that we can. We all represent districts where there are people who can afford to do things, people who can't, people who want to do stuff, people who are absolutely disinterested. But the fact is, if everybody recycles, it makes the world a little better place. If people plant pollinator gardens, it makes the world a little better place. If we plant more trees, we can fix a lot of problems. So I think what we're trying to do here with our plan is just to set up the opportunity. And thanks for the hard work that went into it.
Thank you, Miss Allen. Is there anybody else online who'd like to speak? All right, because it's a little after 5 and I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for public speakers. Ms. Bates and then Mr. Roth.
I just want to clarify something with Ms. Wolnick. Can we say that there are no unfunded mandates, that there will be grants found, or that the mandates are more suggestions and encouragement, and let's find the money from grants that can be private grants, not taxpayer grants?
Correct.
There's
Yeah.
many things.
The intent of the plan is not to create unfunded mandates. Correct.
Good. And so in terms of that, having the plan will help us speed up finding those grants. because we'll know where our strategies and where our intentions are going.
Correct.
So there's no unfunded mandates in this plan or intended.
Very good. Mr. Roth?
Ms. Hinshaw, did you want to speak?
Okay. Mr. Roth?
It was similar to what Mavis just said. And Jody kind of said it. It's a recommendation. We're not forcing anyone. And I think that needs to be in the resolution to say that. So we're not scaring people, because fear factor is the worst thing we can do. And part of it is, some of it kind of points out too, we want to be careful not get ahead of the technology. I know, everyone's talking about electric. And 20 years ago, I had a problem that the government was looking at electric or hydrogen, and they should have picked both. Because the old quote I use a lot is, you know how to tell pioneers, and it's by the arrows sticking out of their backs. So we shouldn't get ahead of the technology. And
Definitely
actually be flexible.
being flexible.
Yeah, and fast.
Tech-
And then the county needs,
This will help us be faster.
and the county needs to lead. Like, we need to get to LED lights as an example. I keep bringing that up. Sorry, but it could save us almost $1 million a year. So we should be doing.
It's coming.
I know. I'm impatient. I want it yesterday, not tomorrow.
You
Thank
go for
you.
that, I'll go for the trees. How's that? 250 trees. Yeah, Mr. Iqbal, then last speaker.
Yeah. Madam Chair, I would like to ask Jody, if she is here. This is regarding the landfills and the waste management. We did very successful project, which I think is a landmark for us in Geneva. But we don't have any other project like that in our projections. And the solid waste, disposal of the solid waste is a problem. It is getting more and more expensive.
Could you repeat that, please?
The disposal of the solid waste is
Yes.
a big problem. It's getting more and more expensive. There are no landfills nearby, and the trucks have to go further and further, and it costs the residents exponentially more. And I know Jody's department is doing very well, but I'd like to hear from her what are they doing and what more we can do to help them.
If the chairwoman would be okay with, that is certainly a bigger discussion. If it would be all right with you, Dr. Iqbal, if we could defer that to an Energy and Environment Committee, because I think it is a very worthwhile discussion and allow
Absolutely.
the public to speak.
I would agree with that. That's an in-depth conversation
Okay.
that needs to be brought forward, and we referenced it with the
Mhm.
methane.
Mhm.
So perhaps that can be included with that.
Thank you.
And a good question, excellent question. All right, ladies, and gentlemen, the board, with no other questions or comments, we do not have need for executive session, so let's go on to our public comment. And as tradition, as required, we will have 30 minutes on agenda, 15 minutes off agenda. That means there will be a total of 6 speakers, not time, but 6 speakers who can speak 5. However, we will still count on 30 minutes. So if any of you would like to condense your presentation to allow someone else to speak for that total of 30 minutes, we could have more speakers present their ideas and their needs. And then 15 minutes, of course, the same way, 3 minutes apiece, so 5 speakers off agenda. Don't need to encourage you to keep the cheering down a little bit so that we can continue on a little bit quicker. But certainly your smiles and hands up are always welcomed for those people you agree with. So the first speaker is Susan Russo.
Madam Chair and Committee of the Whole, my name is Susan Russo, and I live in Batavia. As one of the 83 persons who served on the Climate Action Implementation Plan team, I want to thank you for the foresight and fortitude you exhibited in giving us the opportunity to develop the plan. We were a diverse group of people from every sector of Kane County. We represented the two largest cities of Aurora and Elgin, the Tri-Cities, the small towns and villages, and the agricultural community. We came from different perspectives on the issue of climate change and included business owners, students, retirees, community leaders, and government employees. We were given the immense responsibility of representing our fellow Kane County residents in developing the plan, including the 85% of residents who indicated that they have already noticed the signs of climate change, and the 74% who have been personally impacted by the effects of climate change. The beauty of the Climate Action Implementation Plan is its comprehensiveness. It will serve as a guidebook for the municipalities outside Kane County jurisdiction as they develop policies to mitigate and adapt to the effects of climate change. It will serve as a toolkit that allows those local bodies of government to determine when and how the effects of climate change will be mitigated in order to avoid the need to adapt to the worst of those effects. And finally, it will serve as the manual for the Kane County Board to implement policies, ordinances, rules, and regulations to mitigate and adapt to climate change in the county and to position itself as the climate change leader, both regionally and statewide. In 1896, a Swedish scientist by the name of Svante Arrhenius calculated that doubling atmospheric carbon dioxide would increase the Earth's surface temperature. However, because of the relatively low rate of CO2 production in 1896, Arrhenius reasoned that the warming would take thousands of years. Because of the increasing rate of fossil fuel use after 1896, he revised this prediction just 12 years later and determined that warming would take hundreds of years, not thousands of years. Now, 128 years later, the effects of warming, climate change, are upon us. The lives of those currently sitting in this room will likely experience minimal impact from these effects. But the lives of our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren will be affected severely. I urge the Kane County Board to make the forward-thinking and responsible decision to adopt the Kane County Climate Action Implementation Plan. Thank you.
So the next speaker is Juliana Clausen. Juliana Clausen? Juliana here? Oh, there she is. But that beautiful baby is being so very good.
Am I able to speak?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Hi, thank
Like,
you so
and
much.
Juliana, if you can, because I know you've got the little one.
Hello?
Very good.
Okay, thank you. I'm here today because, well, I'm a mom and I am just concerned for my son's future. 2/3 of children in America have anxiety about climate crisis. And I'm here today to ask the question, why? Is it truly because we're facing a crisis? Or is it because of the education that these children are receiving? When I was in elementary school as a Gen Zer, I was taught that there was so much pollution in the water and in the air that acid rain was going to fall from the sky and burn me chemically. Me and my peers were afraid to go outside until one day one of us accidentally got stuck in the rain and found out that was not true. Time and time again, we realize that these climate prophecies do not happen. I understand that we want to live in a clean and healthy world. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But what we do disagree with is spending tax dollars on empty promises that will not benefit our children. We are scaring them into submission, teaching them to not think for themselves. As far as this climate action plan, so-called, by Pale Blue Dot, I did some digging into Pale Blue Dot. And I have to say that I don't believe that they're an excellent company. They were founded by 2 architects. I'm sure they're lovely people. They enjoy the outdoors, but they are no expert. And when I tried to access the studies that this whole plan was based off of, the methods were not explained. The data sets were not given. And I went to school for geography. I majored in geography. And for those who don't know, it's not cartography, not just that. But I worked with GIS and data collection. I would be one of the people making this so-called plan had it not been for a political ecology class that I took my senior year of college. I love debate. So I said, I'm going to have some fun. I'm going to debate something that I don't agree with. And back then I voted left. I did. And I was a full-on environmentalist. My whole degree was based on it. And after spending hours researching, wanting to win this debate, I learned that I was on the wrong side. I just plead with you. I know you want to do the right thing. I know you love your family members, your friends, and you want them to live in a healthy, happy world. I don't think this is the way to go about it. I think that everything that they said in that study, we could have said ourselves. Hey, let's have some chickens so we don't have as much food waste. Let's do some composting. Let's plant native plants. I think we have done a great job doing that. I don't think we need to pay people to do it. And I think that we are smart enough and have enough common sense to take care of our earth. I plead with you, work with us. We want to work with you. Thank you so much.
The next speaker is Frank Esposito.
Madam Chair, usually I say good morning, but I'll have to say good afternoon, at least that. Thank you
Good
for the
afternoon.
opportunity to speak. Mr. Young, when he made his remarks, covered a lot of the points that I was thinking about. So I will just highlight some things, and I'm not going to take all the time that is allotted to me. On page 14 of the presentation, at the top of it, and the presentation was a little different on the screen than it is in your packet, but in your packet is page 14. It says for community-wide scope focuses on encouraging and supporting action. I want to emphasize that, encouraging and supporting action. And then down at the bottom, it says any action with a suggestion to explore policy or ordinance change should be understood to go through the appropriate process as part of that action's implementation. Understood. Do we understand everything that would happen if many of these things are implemented? I look at this section, which was page 15 of the packet, transportation and land use. The very first thing, increase community-wide vehicle miles traveled. How in God's name are you going to do that? Okay. The second one, increase public transit commuter ridership. How do you do that? Maybe you can make suggestions, start advertising campaigns to lead people to that. Then down point 6, achieve 100% conversion of gasoline passenger vehicles within local government and public fleets by 2030. Are you really going to be able to do that? Can we afford to do that? We're having trouble getting by now. And you want to buy very expensive vehicles? And where's the power coming from? We're not producing enough electricity. California was brought up. Look at the problems they're having with getting enough electricity. On page 7 of the climate action, because of my background in printing, please change the word is to it in the second line. But it says that this is a living document updated as technologies and science advances. Yes, I agree. As time goes along, things will get better. We will be able to do more. We have the right mindset to save the planet and save our people, but we can't force it on people. So my main point is you wanted to change the codes for building, and the code was being changed to require new builders with new homes to include the setup for charging electrical vehicles. And also when there's multiple units being built, that there be the ability for every resident to have that capability. That was an ordinance. It's not asking them to do that. I mentioned at the last meeting that I talked about this. People in my subdivision decided to get electric vehicles, and they paid for the installation of the electricity that would be needed. Fine, let the public do it if that's what they want. Don't force them. Then we talk about trees. Now you're talking, if you cut a tree down, you got to replace it with 2 or 3 or 4, whatever. So are we going to take this document now and start coming up with things that dictate that you've got ordinances, that this is the way you've got to live? Let the people decide what's best for them. Thank you.
Bruce, Kenies? Is Ruth here? Here. Oh, Russ, I'm sorry. Hi, Russ, not Ruth.
People usually get the first name right, the last name, not a chance. It's Russ Nimes, by the way.
Nice, okay.
Anyway, I'm a 38-year St. Charles resident, and I just wanted to say a few words about the data behind the climate changes, policies and conclusions, and the driving force behind it. My background is in engineering. I'm a retired senior aerospace avionics software and hardware designer with over a decade experience in that field and about 30 years of engineering in general. As such, the attention to detail about the quality of the data that drives the decisions is paramount. When you're talking avionics or airplanes, you can't make any assumptions about the quality of the data. You have to know what the quality is and that you have all of the information when you make that decision, that you're not missing some major aspect of it and draw a conclusion that's wrong. So anyway, we can't, as engineers, we can't suggest any design changes based on simple observations or by what they call the consensus of engineers. The decision can only be made when enough proof is provided to have a scientific conclusion. Consensus of engineers is basically where they all kind of agree, yeah, that sounds about right, but there's no real hard fact basis for that conclusion. Okay, in the context of climate change, while there's a strong correlation between rising global temperatures and increased carbon dioxide levels, at least based on those charts, this alone is not proof that one causes the other. One major part of the process is rarely mentioned, and that's called solar output. However, the scientific percentage of the Earth's temperature increases due to solar activity from 1850 to 1900, and then from 2010 to 2019 is not explicitly stated in the provided information about the climate change models. It is not mentioned anywhere. You can't find any numbers on it. It's like it doesn't exist. The available data focuses on human-caused increase in temperature, does not provide a direct comparison to the impact of the solar activity during that same period. Something that is greatly ignored by the climate community are the observed changes on other planets in our solar system. This is the point I want to make here. Most of the planets and or moons show sign of recent warming. Venus has increasing winds. Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Triton, Pluto all show signs of warming. The astronomers were then surprised to discover a dramatic warming of Neptune's south pole over the last 2 years of observation, where temperature rapidly rose 11 degrees Celsius between 2018 and 2020. Uranus has not been previously seen storms of the magnitude they're now observing since 2014, and it correlates with a dramatic warming of the planet's surface temperature. While scientists say the evidence they provide on climate change suggests that the Earth's increase in temperature might be due to human activities, specifically the emissions of greenhouse gases, they have determined the simple relationship is adequate enough to come to a scientific consensus that human activity is the source of this change. A suggestion is not proof, and neither is scientific consensus. In the context of the information we're discussing, it's important to understand the difference between suggestion, scientific consensus, and scientific conclusion. The scientific suggestion is nothing more than an initial observation and an educated guess. A scientific consensus represents an agreement among scientists about a particular topic based on a body of evidence, while a scientific conclusion is a statement that is derived from and supported by the evidence in a scientific study, specific study. No such study has ever been designed or performed in regards to climate change. By the way, there is one valid consensus that I did run across. That is 97% of the climate scientists pay their mortgages with man-made climate change grants. Grants are tax money. So we are being taxed for that research, which ignores a huge part of the equation. So let's talk about power sources for a bit. Most windmills do not provide an ROI, return on investment, in their mechanical lifetime. Observe any windmill farm and count the non-moving rotors. They are the money pits of windmills. Proponents claim windmills pay for themselves, which is not true. A huge taxpayer subsidies are mostly ignored in the cost discussion and pay for the majority of the project. It's a loan from the taxpayer that is never paid back. The argument is wind is free, but the windmills are not. Solar has a very similar issue. By the way, I observed something, and I wonder if somebody can explain to me why the solar panels on the south side of the jail are pointing east when they should be pointing south.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Frank. I mean, I'm through. I am so sorry. Thank you so much. Mr. Glenn, John Glenn. All righty. Kathy Flesberg.
Everyone. Okay, I'm going to be all over the place because so many people said what I wanted to say. So I'm going to just go over this really briefly. I really dove into this and I spent a lot of my weekend, unfortunately, on this. And after seeing the presentation that was done in March without anyone's knowledge, I just feel that you guys the consultants are going about this all in the wrong direction. First, the plan should not take Kane County over the next 6 years. It should take the county over the next 10 to 20 years. It should have everything laid out in detail of what steps should be taken if you want the residents to comply with going to clean energy. And a lot of this, I think, should have been already hashed out in the environmental committee. I feel like this is a waste of time for you guys because this is so incomplete. And I think it's all over the place. I heard that there was going to be more meetings on more collaborations, but I couldn't find any. Okay, I looked at Cook, DuPage, Will County. I looked at state plans. I looked at everything. First of all, everyone's taking it to 2050 and 2060. not over the next 6 years. In fact, if you read Cook County's plan, nowhere on their initial plan does it state anything for residential change. Nothing. The first 2 phases are for the government buildings to be 100% energy efficient by 2030. And the second phase is for the cities within Cook County. And that's what I'm saying is if you show movement, then maybe the public will move. If you want them to comply. Dictatorship is not going to get you anywhere. I mean, no disrespect to Mr. Redmond, but I do not consider him an expert in this field at all. I mean, a consultant should not be changing the wording in the document that you're paying $75,000 for. I think, I don't mean disrespect, but I really do think I could have done a better job. I mean, and I only spent 2 days on this. I'm not gonna even, I mean, he doesn't even have any case studies on his website. He's an architect, an urban planner that has a dream and a vision for clean energy. That's what his website says. I don't know how we picked him. I don't know if there was a bidding process, but I don't think Kane County is where he should be learning the new job that he wants to do. I'm not even going to talk about residential rebates because you're never going to get people to buy 99,000 vehicles in the next 6 years unless you put charging stations out. That's the first step that needs to be done. And there's grants for you. There's not grants for us. There are no grants for middle-class people, not ComEd, not the state, not the feds. So that all of the grants are for the lower class. As far as buses go, there are grants for buses and there's only grants for enough for 350 buses. So it would be wise to get to the schools in Kane County so that we don't get the tax increases. They could get 150,000 per bus. And there's 29,000 buses in Illinois and there's grants for only 350 of them. Biden announced 623 million in grants for charging stations. You could get 15,000 for each charging station you install. And the government is putting 1 charging station for every 666 residents. That means you need to put in like 750 charging stations throughout the county. Obviously, that wouldn't be all of yours. You know, businesses would put them up and everything. But that's where you need to start. If you want us to buy vehicles, we need to be able to pull in, charge like a gas station. There should be one available at all times, or else none of us are going to buy. As far as cost savings, it would cost me over 15,000 to get 220. I just downsized into an old home. I don't even have a 220 panel. I just updated my 110 panel. It would cost me over $15,000 just to get the electric out to my garage. And that doesn't include repairing my torn up new patio and sidewalk. One thing that Mr. Redmond said that I really found disturbing was he said, why not harvest those economic potentials for our community instead of letting other communities in on it? I thought that's what this is all about, is clean energy for everyone.
Thank you very much, Kathy. All right, next speaker. Robin Keel.
Hi, I'm Robin. I'd like to address the 85% who agree with the climate change that you're proposing here. I'd like to see the names. Now, one part of this said that the people are concerned about climate change. So did they agree with your climate change or are they concerned with your climate change? Because I don't believe that's the case. And I do believe that it should be public to know who agrees with this plan, okay? And not just pull a number out of the sky. I would like to say the 99% of us disagree with this climate change plan. We don't want to be herded into little tiny apartments and have our electric, water, and gas cut 25%. Are you going to be moving into one of those little tiny homes? I probably wouldn't think so. I would also like to know that our government and every government, excuse me, on this planet has weather modification. A lot of this is done through the HAARP system, HAARP, okay, where they can control our weather. Other ways they're controlling our weather is spraying the chemtrails in the sky, seeding our clouds. They're also spraying aluminum, strontium, and barium on us, which is polluting our water, our food, and all life on this planet. It's also causing Alzheimer's to most people because the aluminum goes straight to your brain, just so you know that. I do believe that most of us do not agree with this agenda, and it's just an agenda to take away our sovereignty and our rights. We have a right to be on this planet as Americans, as citizens, as children of God. We have a right to be here. We have a right to our sovereignty. Well, I do believe that people of the earth, and especially of Kane County, which I've been a resident of 34 years, have a right to know what's happening. And also on the electric cars, the amount of radiation coming from those charging stations is through the roof and has been tested and has happened. Also, the amount of the electric cars that have blown up, okay? It's very common. But I thank you for your time.
This brief. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak my opinion. I've heard a lot of misinformation and uninformed opinions here over a lot of this. I fully support, and I hope you will all vote for the climate mitigation plan for Kane County. I think this is really important. Things like electric cars. Yes, the upfront cost of an electric car is more than a gas powered car. What it is over the long term, it's much cheaper because the electricity per mile is cheaper than the gasoline burned per mile. And the maintenance is far, far less. An electric car is basically a battery and an electric motor, very low maintenance compared to a combustion engine, which is so complex nowadays. Everything has to be computer run. And just to fix it, it's ridiculous. It would end up being a cost savings for most people to be electrified. Things like the gas-powered lawn maintenance. There's nothing I like better than waking up to 95 decibels of sound and smell and carbon dioxide polluting my neighborhood at 7 o'clock in the morning when the lawn maintenance people come around. I much prefer they have some lithium batteries, and nobody's saying everybody has to go out and buy new stuff right now, but things wear out. When they do, you replace it with something that you're going to have to start replacing too, like the gas or electric powered blowers and lawnmowers and etc. And it's such a small burden compared to saving the planet for our children and our grandchildren. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Breezewitz. Final speaker is Robin Magalia. And Robin, you're speaking via Zoom, I believe?
Yes, that's me.
Are you here?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Oh, and I can see you as well. Can we just, Robin, just hold on a second.
Okay.
Give us just a second. We want you to pull up full screen so we can see you. There you are. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Sean. All right. Are we ready? There you go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I was pretty last minute with this. So the first thing I want to talk about is bathrooms and restaurants. I don't know who mandated that, but I sure am glad they did. And they don't save us any money. But again, I'm really glad that bathrooms and restaurants got mandated. Maybe that's not a county thing. But the county health department mandates things, and it mandates things to solve problems and keep us safe. And nobody really complains about what the health department mandates, or maybe they do, but I'm really glad that we have a county health department that mandates some things to keep us safe and solve health problems that could be dire. And I think climate change is a health problem. So I'm really glad that we're at least talking about it. Leadership, you know, it doesn't have to give mandates. It can just give encouragement, and it can give education. And so having the conversation is really, really something that's close to my heart, because I think it's great that you're informing the people of Kane County that yes, we have a little problem, and we have some intention to make some changes to solve it. So just a little bit about me. I live zero waste, and I'll tell you, big business makes my life really hard, because how I have to separate my trash just gets harder and harder because packaging is just getting more and more creative. And so I appreciate that the county is going to maybe address some of that to make my life easier. I also have been driving electric vehicles since 2012. I plug in at home, it's charged with solar panels, and I had all kinds of personal grants that got all that done. And I'm kind of middle class. I live in a 3,300 square foot house in a normal neighborhood, and I got grants. And I just put in a heat pump. It's likely because I'm also income dependent on like Lifeline. I'm getting some like really great grants. So there is lots of incentives out there available from the federal government to help people like me live in accordance with my values of caring for creation. You know, I don't know. I can't make a planet. I can't make a tree. I don't know who did that, but I want to be a good steward of those things from the creator that made them. I'll just say that. And I think that's all I have. I hope it's helpful. I hope it gives you a perspective. I hope you really think about moving in a direction that gives us a cleaner, greener place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. And Robin, while you're still there, I just want to say I enjoy seeing your array of spools right behind you. As a former seamstress and as a hobby, I can appreciate that. So thank you. So that
it's how I exercise my right to repair.
I'm sure we can bring quite a few things of my own over there for fixing.
I have tools too.
So thank you so much. So that ends our public comment. As usual, I appreciate everybody's words. With that, Mr. Kenyon.
I'd like to move that we adjourn this meeting.
That was all, that we don't not have a meeting where there was no,
Don't you
everyone
want to
had a
adjourn?
chance to
I want to
speak.
sit here all night.
Yeah. We've,
And
so I wish you all a sunny afternoon. sunny late afternoon, early evening. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for coming.